Old powers waken, shadows stir. An age of wonder and terror will soon be upon us. An age for gods and heroes.
The glass candles are burning, and you're listening to the Obsidian Nights podcast.
In today's episode of Obsidian Nights podcast, Sansa 1, I am joined by Shadowcat Bex, and we are going to do a deep dive into Sansa 1. I'm so glad you could make it. Would you like to introduce yourself to the Sweet Summer family?
Hi, my name is Shadowcat Bex, aka Rebecca. I am one of the hosts of the Creatives Guild. I am the editor, and yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking about Sansa. When I first put out the call for guests to come on the Obsidian Nights podcast, you wanted to do Sansa?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Well, actually, I want to do a good Stannis chapter, but you're not there yet.
Everybody wants to do Stannis. Everybody wants to do Stannis. And so when we get to A Clash of Kings, I'm sure I'll have you back on. So, or and a lot of other people
do a melee.
They all want to do Stannis.
And the last man standing gets like all the good Davos chapters.
Yes, I love a good Davos chapter. So we're doing a Game of Thrones Sansa 1. So everybody knows I hate Sansa. We can get that out the way. I'm not going to be doing this chapter as like a Sansa hater because I do think book Sansa is a lot more interesting than show Sansa. And book Sansa, whilst she's kind of worse, in book 1, she's way better by the time we get to Elaine Stone. So Sansa 1 is a very interesting chapter, but let's just get into the juice. So the Starks, Eddard, Sansa, Arya, and their household are traveling south to King's Landing. It's this long, grueling journey. It's thousands of miles. They are riding in a huge caravan of carts and horses and a wheelhouse. So they stop to camp throughout their journey south. And while they are on these stops, the king goes hunting. Like he goes hunting all the time. You live by the hunt. You die by the hunt. But when we last left, Ned and the girls, they were in the Barrowlands. But now they are south of the Neck, no longer in the north. They are in the Riverlands. And on this particular morning, they are preparing to leave the inn at the crossroads. There's a camp being there. Like, there's a lot going on. So the king and Ned, they're off hunting. While the camp is being broken down and packed up to ride for another day, Sansa has her breakfast with Septa Mordane and Lady. And Arya is nowhere to be found. And Sansa is worried. And she's not worried about, like, where is Arya? Is she safe? Like, she's pretty sure that Arya is fine. She's more worried about how Arya is going to act today. Because today, the queen has invited Sansa, Arya, and Septa Mordane to ride in the royal wheelhouse with herself and Myrcella. So Arya, she wants no parts of this, of course, which is so Arya and Sansa. So Arya and Sansa. The dynamic between the Stark sisters is as clear as the dynamic to me, like in my opinion, between Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark. They're complete opposites. So, and I think George sets this up in Arya 1, and he sets it up how Arya and Sansa are just these polar opposites, like north and south. So Sansa wants to ride in the wheelhouse with the queen and wear pretty dresses and talk of songs and heroes. And Arya wants to ride horses, see all the sights, talk to the small folk, and go treasure hunting along the Trident with Micah, a butcher's boy, and look for Rhaegar's ruby and cover herself in mud. Like, they're so different. But one thing I found really interesting, and I kind of want to talk about it, is how Septa Mordane classifies them. So all of Arya's behaviors are considered bad. And all of Sansa's behaviors are considered good. And it's this quote that kind of makes me feel like that. You're a good girl, Sansa, but I do vow, when it comes to that creature, you're as willful as Arya. So Sansa is considered good because she's obedient, and Arya is considered bad because she's willful, which I guess is the social norm in Westeros. Like women and young girls and ladies in training, they are expected to be obedient. Do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. The one thing that I find interesting kind of even about that statement, especially because it's so tied in with the direwolf, with Lady, that, you know, it's almost kind of like there actually is at some point a very common ground between Sansa and Arya. Like their exteriors, their interests, like kind of like the not superficial, but you know, they have a lot of differences, but you know, at the same time, like they're very much the same personality wise. You know, that's kind of like what I gravitate towards at that part of the chapter.
Yeah, I do see how Sansa being willful when it comes to Lady is like that's how Arya is when it comes to Nymeria. But what I was thinking is
sorry, no.
So
okay, I was gonna say, well, you know, as far as the way Septa Mordain is, you know, educating them, yes, like, you know, it's very much like the patriarchal social norms that we're very used to, especially in fantasy. You know, so, you know, and I know other people have said this. I'm pretty sure, you know, that like Brendan Beefish and poor Quentin say it a lot on Nauticast. Like, you know, Sansa's almost like the indictment on like, you know, that whole structure of the society at this point in the story. So yeah, I agree. Like, you know, Septa Mordain and she's helping drive a wedge between them as well.
Yeah, so Septa Mordain, we're going to talk about her too, because everybody knows, like, I think everybody that watches my channel or listens to my podcast, they know that I don't really care for Sansa, especially a Game of Thrones Sansa. But I think a lot of how she acts is how she's been taught to act by Septa Mordain and her mother. So, like, we could say, you know, well, Arya was raised by these same people, or we could say, well, she's super young, and she is super young. But like when we're going through this chapter, like a lot of people, when I talk about Sansa, they're like, oh, well, she's only this is her age. She's only this old. And I don't think that excuses anything that she does, because every one of these characters are young and naive, and they all have this idea of the world that really isn't accurate, which brings me to Joffrey and the delusion that Sansa has with Joffrey.
Well, or kind of just like continue on with like your thought. Like, yeah, like you're right. Sansa doesn't, I guess, like I've never like totally, I love Sansa, but I also agree, like, Game of Thrones Sansa, like, she's a pill. I don't like her. I didn't like her in the show. I didn't like her the first time I read the books, like, and there is, so, she almost has, like, even less excuse for, like, when she messes up. Because, like, in a way, like, you think that she would know better, but it's also, as like time goes on, it's like how like ill prepared, you know, her mother and Septa Mordain, like how they did not prepare her like for anything that was coming down the road. So she's not quite in, you know, the same world that Arya's in. Arya's a little bit more realistic. She she has like a feel of the land a lot better than Sansa does.
Yeah, she does, because Arya never fit into that mold. Like, she never fit into the girl that's going to be sewing dresses and doing needlework. She never fit into that, so she kind of branched out on her own. and looked for her own things to comfort her and her own things that she would like, where Sansa didn't, because Sansa was the obedient daughter of Eddard Stark. Like, if you take, I'm just fast forwarding here, if you take like what happened with Sansa telling Cersei about Ned's plans, way ahead in a Game of Thrones, honestly, you would think that Sansa would be the last one to do that because she is the obedient child. Like, she is, out of all of the Starks, she's the obedient child. And all the rest of them are the willful children.
Well, at this point in the story, and you see it a lot in this chapter, like, she's very selfish. She's narcissistic. She really has only one care at this point. And it's not even specifically Joffrey. Like, it's this fairy tale life that she's been dreaming of since, she could have thought. So, and it's partly what's been fed to her as well. She, a very highborn lady. She, was always going to be prepared to marry at least, a high lord of some sort,
I think when you think about Sansa, I do think her journey, like her overall arc, is kind of a redemption arc, because like Game of Thrones, she starts out really unlikable, but then when you get to Feast, she is likable. In Storm, you sympathize with her. I feel like for them to be redemption journeys, they have to start in like these dark, bad places. And I kind of feel like her story is similar to Jaime's a little bit. On the arc, it's like growth.
Yeah, I guess I agree. Like, how her story, I just hate to, I hate to say redemption, because, she messed up. She didn't throw a kid from a tower window, and then. I would say, depending who you are, it might be worse what she did to Ned. It might be worse what she did to Ned, considering what happened. Yes, but, also at the same time, like, somebody was gonna, they were not gonna get away. Like, there is no, the wheels were turning in such a way, and, say what you will about Cersei, like, she is smarter than, like, an 11-year-old child. Like, like, yeah.
Oh, Cersei's a bad bitch.
Sure.
She is smart. She is smarter than Sansa, 100%. And there was some manipulation there, of course, on Cersei's part to make Sansa feel. Sansa has been in the North, where she's been had this sheltered childhood where she doesn't know that the queen could be evil. She doesn't know that the Lannisters could be the villains of the fairy tales.
And it's so funny. I don't know if we want to kind of jump ahead to like when she meets the small council. Like as soon as she's with Barristan Selmy and Renly Baratheon, she goes into full like, oh, I am the daughter of a powerful lord. Like, yes, Barristan Selmy, I've heard of your greatness.
Yeah.
Like, even in the North, we've heard of your greatness. And you, by your extreme youth, like, you can only be Renly Baratheon. And, she's been educated, but she has not been educated at all. Which is so shocking with Catelyn, considering, Catelyn had like lived through wars. And, so what, like, Sansa's 11?
Mm-hmm.
So, she was 2 when the Greyjoy Rebellion happened. Like, Sansa hasn't known war.
Yeah, she's
and,
11.
Like, they gave her no political education whatsoever.
I think it was like a false sense of security that they had.
Maybe.
because I feel like they didn't educate a lot of the children. Like they are. One thing I've noticed during the reread is that they all have these visions of the world that are so different than what the world actually is. Like John thinking the Night's Watch is like some heroic place when really it's a prison for rapers that no one would choose. And then like Bran thinking that all the knights in the songs are heroes, when we learn later like that all the knights in the songs are pretty shitty people.
Yeah, well, and that's Sansa's, worldview, is that they both are so in love with the stories and, the fairy tale, the songs and the stories.
Yeah. They got a shitty education. They got a...
Yeah. But, one would assume, obviously we don't know too much, but, Rob steps into the political situation pretty seamlessly, like, despite his age. So, obviously... They were training him to be Lord of Winterfell one day. So he's been under his dad, like, in his dad's shadow, because, like, Bran and Rob, they go with Ned to do the beheading of... Right. And Jon goes as well. But, they've been witness to it. They've seen what goes down. But Sansa and Arya are doing needlework and lady classes. So their training and upbringing is a little different, even though they still live in the same castle, just because one has a vagina and the others don't. Well, and that's like, a huge failure. Or like, I feel like maybe a little bit more so with Sansa, especially after like Sansa's betrothed to Joffrey. But then again, like, Bran fell out the window pretty soon after that. But, even like Ned should have done something. Like when you meet Marjorie, like Marjorie obviously had that education that Sansa didn't have.
Yeah, she didn't have it. And one thing I could say is like Marjorie is, once you're past the neck, I feel like once you're past the neck, the education is different. Like in the North, I don't really think they concern themselves with politics that much.
Well,
I really don't.
And I mean, there's obviously like, politics in the North.
Right, those. But like the Game of Thrones, they're far removed from the Game of Thrones. That's why Ned's like a fish out of water when he gets to King's Landing.
I'm sure also a lot of it has to do with like Ned's own PTSD from like the wars he fought. Regardless, like they could have taught Sansa all that stuff and she maybe would have been the same way anyway. Like,
Yeah, I feel like to me, you were saying earlier before we started recording, like we all know that girl. We all know that Sansa. And to me, she's a mean girl. Like I think of her like as Gretchen Wieners or like, one of those mean girls from the movie. Yeah. But, like, if she was in today's age, like, she would be like that. But, yeah, she's definitely selfish and narcissistic. But she's completely goo-goo gaga over Joffrey. She's pumped for the wheelhouse. Not only because, like, she likes the grander things. Like, she does like the fancy things like lemon cakes and tea and riding with the queen and dresses. Like, she loves that shit. But the reason she's excited is because Joffrey might be there. And I'll read this quote. Just thinking it made her feel a strange fluttering inside, even though they were not to marry for years and years. Sansa did not know Joffrey yet, but she was already in love with him. He was all she ever dreamt her prince to be, tall and handsome and strong, with hair like gold. She treasured every chance to spend time with him, few as they were. So we've all been there, right? Like having those young, naive crushes.
It's almost good that he turned out even more terrible because she was doomed to be dating that guy for the rest of her life. Yeah.
Oh my God. He's.
Oh, well,
it's good
yes.
he died. Like, or it's good. It's good that she didn't have to marry him.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, when it comes to Sansa, like, everyone around her has picked up on Joffrey, like, not being good. And she hasn't. Like, Arya and Jon and Bran and Robb, they have all realized that Joffrey is a shitty person. But Sansa is, like, trying to live this song, this dream, like, this idea that she has for her prince. That she can't see through the fog. Like, she can't see the red flags that are popping up over and over. So she just can't see that shit. And I don't think it's that she can't see it. I just think that she doesn't want to. Like, she has this vision, this idea of what she wants for herself. And instead of breaking out of the air quotes matrix and realizing who Joffrey is, she would rather like fit Joffrey into this dream of hers.
You know, she's like, oh yeah, I got a prince. I'm in love. It's great. You know, and again, it's, you know, it's not even just kind of being that, like, we all know that girl.
Yes.
It's like, there's something like, I think there's a teeny tiny of that girl, like that stupid girl in all of us that, you know, like we're just like fed this shit from like, you know, being like when you play with Barbies, you know, so like there's like that extreme version of that. And it's like, yeah.
Or when you watch fucking Disney fairy tales, Sansa is like the normal girl that has the normal visions of, you know, I don't want to say normal, but
she's like a very hyper stereotypical, like it's like she's very stereotypical, like I believe in love and da da da, but it's like, you know, hyper, you know, it's on steroids.
So Sansa goes to look for Arya. And she finds Arya, and Arya's like trying to brush Nymeria's mud out of her hair. And Sansa's just like, oh my God. Like, Sansa is just like fed up with Arya because Sansa, you know, she wants this sister like Jean Poole. Like, she wants a sister like that. And Arya is just the complete opposite. And I think one thing George does a lot is have characters from the histories that like other characters have common personalities with. And I think Sansa and Arya are a lot like Visenya and Rhaenys. Like, the description of Visenya is so spot on to Arya, and the description of Rhaenys is so spot on to Sansa. Like, take the dragons away and the purple eyes and the Valyrian, their personalities are so similar. So I like when I envision these arguments between Sansa and Arya, like I wonder, like, did Visenya and Rhaenys, were they arguing on Dragonstone like this?
Probably. Although they probably, you know, weren't doing so much needlework as opposed to like learning how to ride dragons. So,
well, I wonder what a Dragonstone education is like when, you know, the dragons reigned versus a Winterfell education.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because unfortunately we see a Winterfell education, especially for the girls, you know, and it's like, well, that all sucks. Yeah, I would rather have like a Dragonstone education, like pre-conquest. So,
yes, I think I would rather have it. Like, if I can't get a Citadel education because I'm a girl, then give me a Dragonstone education. So Sansa just basically like tells Arya, like, you have to come. We'll be in the wheelhouse. We'll be like with pillows and eating lemon cakes. And Arya's like, there's not even no windows in the wheelhouse. Like, Arya wants to see the world and experience the world, and Sansa wants to just exist in it and live in it. And I'm not saying that as like points for Arya, points for Sansa. I'm just saying like how different, like that's a difference between them. Yeah, so Arya says that she doesn't even like Cersei.
Mm-hmm.
So Arya's picked up on the bullshit, like, from the door. She doesn't like any of them.
And Jon picked up on Cersei right away as well.
Yeah.
You know?
And I wonder, like, if that's part of... So, and they talk about this in the chapter. Like, Sansa talks about, like, Arya being... Arya was so different from them that she asked her mom, like, is she a bastard?
Which...
And her mom's like, no, she's not a bastard.
Which also, to be fair, I think that's a very normal sibling thing. I know I have an older brother, and I know we both have asked our parents if the other one was adopted. You know, like, that's, you know, even, like, we never asked if they were a bastard, but, you know, we definitely, that's, it kind of, you know, a lot of, like, the Sansa-Arya relationship is really, like, you know, just, like, sibling silliness. Yeah. Yeah.
Bullshit. Yeah. So, Maester of the Wind says that bastards learn quicker. Like, that's what he says. Like, bastards have to observe things and learn quicker. And I wonder if, like, even though Arya isn't a bastard, she still has, I won't say lived a bastard's life, but she's been treated more similarly to Jon than she's been treated to Sansa. Because...
Oh, okay.
Not her parents, but, like, the people that they hang with. Like, they make fun of Arya. They call her Force Arya and things like that. So I wonder if those type of things, like, I said the people they hang with. Like they're going to the club. So, like, is it those kind of things where she doesn't feel like inside of her, she doesn't feel like she fits in with her family? Is that what makes her learn faster? Like, is that what has pushed her, like, kind of propelled her in growth ahead of her siblings?
Yes, I do think that there is something from her. This will all tie together later on. There's something from, like, you know, Arya's isolation from the rest of her siblings, maybe with the exception of Jon. You know, she's, like, I think she's exploring the world in a much different way. She wants to be, like, she wants to ride with the host. She wants to meet, like, the sellswords and the cooks and the washerwomen. Like, she has a very, like, she's just more worldly. Yeah. And yeah, that has to do a lot more with the fact that she's actually, like, taking it upon herself to, like, go out in the world, but Sansa is much more closed-minded, and, you know, where her world is just, like, you know, like you said, it's like the nice things, it's the wheelhouse, it's the lemon cakes, it's the prince and the princess and la-di-da-di-da.
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate.
You know.
So, when Arya says, you know, I don't like the queen, Sansa's like, what? Like, she doesn't even know what to say to that. And then she starts walking towards the inn or towards the camp, and she sees, like, this crowd gathering around the wheelhouse, and it is some people that the small council have sent from King's Landing to lead them the rest of the way to King's Landing. It's an honor guard. And the Sansa meets Sandor Clegane, Ilyn Payne, Barristan Selmy, and Renly Baratheon.
I do not like Renly.
Yeah. What, you don't like Renly? You gotta stop listening to Nauticast. They've poisoned you. They've poisoned you against Renly.
My dislike of Renly happened
No, I'm just
way
kidding.
before Nauticast.
I always mess with them about Stannis and Renly and all that.
Oh, yeah.
So Sansa, like, she knows all of them, like you were saying, like, she's proud to say she's Eddard Stark's daughter, and, you know, it's just, like, a meeting of people. Like, it feels kind of like exposition a little bit. Like, it doesn't really feel important to the chapter as a whole.
No, I mean, it's definitely, like, yeah, it's exposition. It's just kind of the, like, go ahead, like, we, you know, so we don't meet 50 people, you know, 5 chapters later.
Yeah.
It's, you know, kind of spread it out. But also, you kind of see it in, oh, man, I wish I had been, because I'm also, like, doing another reread, so I haven't gotten to the point in Game of Thrones again where they're in King's Landing, but you know, you see this like very idealized image of the court where, you know, Cersei is there and Barristan Selmy's and all of his grandeur and smiling, and Renly Baratheon is in his grandeur and smiling and cracking jokes, and you know, there's it's this idealized version of what court is. And it's like Sansa also like kind of once again not totally seeing everything that's going on, or like she's just seeing the show that's being put on. So I think like there's a little bit like, and not the first time that you read it, but like if you know, do rereads for this, like it feels different. Like when you meet those small council members for the first time, you know, like when you're on reread, because it's kind of like, oh, yeah, this isn't what it appears to be.
I also really like that in Sansa's chapter, she is so terrified of Sir Ilyn Payne. I totally feel like that's foreshadowing. Joffrey tells her, like, he's the king's justice, like, he tells her like the story of his tongue getting ripped out, and he speaks damn well with his sword though, and like her father is ultimately going to be killed by Sir Ilyn Payne on Joffrey's command. And then we get Sandor Clegane, which his relationship with Sansa is really interesting. Especially when we get deeper into the books. Especially, like, I really love the Sansa chapter from the tourney with Sandor. I love that chapter. This chapter's packed, for real. Like,
yeah, it's a meaty
it's
one.
meaty as shit. So, with everything that's going on, especially in the last quarter of this chapter, it's like, that meeting can be easily lost in the chapter. The meeting, the small council. But basically, since they have arrived, there will be no wheelhouse ride today for Sansa.
Poor Sansa.
But she's happy because she's about to have a magical day with Joffrey. She gets to spend the whole day with Joffrey.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry.
Day.
Can I insert one thing kind of going back to like Ilyn Payne? You know, you were saying like she got a bad vibe, and it's also I just wanted to read the quote about Lady getting a bad vibe from her. So not only does Sansa have the bad vibe, like, you know, we have Lady also responding, whether it's Lady responding to Sansa's emotions or Lady actually having a bad vibe from Ilyn herself. You know, at some point George has said that all the Stark children have, to some degree, warging ability, and even though so sadly, you know, we'll never know with Sansa for sure, but And this is also like heartbreaking. Like we barely spent any time with Lady.
Yeah.
And Lady just sounds so cute, but so after, you know, like she gotten scared, and then she meets Barristan and Renly, and they, you know, kind of make her feel at ease again. The tension of a few moments ago was gone, and Sansa was beginning to feel comfortable until Sir Ilan Payne shouldered 2 men aside and stood before her, unsmiling. He did not say a word. Lady bared her teeth and began to growl, a low rumble full of menace. But this time Sansa silenced the wolf with a gentle hand to the head. "I am sorry if I offended you, Sir Ilan," she said. You know, it's also kind of going back to, you know, she's like got like fed these like courtesies like all of her life, that even she's like not even trusting that instinct, and she's just going straight to like, you know, I am the daughter of Eddard Stark. I'm the good daughter of Eddard Stark.
Yeah. And you know, the direwolves, I've talked about this in a couple of the previous episodes. They know when somebody isn't right. Like, they know. They've done it with Tyrion. They did it at the Red Wedding. Grey Wind did it at the Red Wedding, or before the Red Wedding. And Summer and Shaggy did it, and Grey Wind did it when Tyrion came back to Winterfell from the Wall. So they've had these reactions to people where if they feel like your intent, like they pick that shit up. But also, like, there are instances where the wolf is acting off of the master's emotions. So like when Bran gets angry at Jojen, Summer starts growling, and Bran is like, or Jojen's like, "That's you. That's not him. That's you."
I know. Ugh.
So it's like both ways that happens. I definitely think that Sansa was a warg. I think she has a dream of her running with Lady. And I do want to say, like, rest in peace, Lady, because I really love all of the direwolves, and my mom has a Siberian Husky, and out of all of the Game of Thrones names that she could have named the Husky, she named it Lady, because when Lady died, she stopped watching Game of Thrones. And then she got a wolf and named it Lady.
Take that, George.
Yeah, take that, George.
Oh yeah, and that's the next chapter you're gonna do. It's such a sad chapter. I've been listening on this reread. It's like my first like actual listen, and even Roy Dotrice like totally like made me tear up when I listened to it last week.
Yeah, it's brutal. And it all starts at the magical day. And I know, so you do tarot, right?
Yes. Well, I am to call me a novice tarot reader is being generous, but that was like my quarantine skill that I've learned. So yes, I did a very quick reading for Miss Sansa the other night, and basically the question that I asked the cards was, what will my life with Prince Joffrey look like? And so this is keeping time. This is, at this point in the story. Not at the end of the chapter, I would say it's the beginning of the chapter. So our first card, our past card, was the Two of Wands reverse. And the Two of Wands in general is the card of foundation and foresight. It's kind of represents you are going to go on a new journey in your life. But when it comes up reverse, that means you ain't prepared. You're not prepared for the journey that you've set out on. Just not prepared. The present card was the Death card. And the Death card doesn't automatically, equal death. Usually it's just kind of, a big change is coming. And, and for Sansa, like, to put it mildly, like, a change is coming, like her life in the North. And it's the change that she's been longing for. Like, the North was so drab and dull, and like, singers barely like ever showed up there. And like, all she did was like fantasize about being a princess in a castle, blah, 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 blah. But I think in this particular instance, like, death means death is coming. And I don't know if it's quite, like, that too down the road, like, if it's Ned or Joffrey, but I actually think that it's very much Lady's death that is pretty much intimate at this point. So, it's kind of, how the interpretations, as on The Simpsons, like, the cards are mysterious, I don't actually have to answer the question, but her future card, and this is why I think this is Lady, her future card is the Hermit reversed, and the Hermit, when it's in its upright position, is usually like, you're gonna go off on your own to gain wisdom, to better yourself. But the Hermit reverse is, unplanned isolation. Like, you were forced into this, like, singular void. Like, you were on your own and not for the reasons why you would want to be traveling on your own. And which I think very much, like, Lady, like, as much as we talk about the direwolves, and especially, like, later on when we see very deep connections happening with the direwolves, for Sansa and Arya, like, we lose Nymeria at the same time, although Nymeria obviously has not died. But, both of the Stark girls, I think, probably even more so than the other Stark children. Well, all the Stark children have identity issues. But, so much of Lady's death kind of, like, is really the beginning of the end for Sansa. And, and obviously Joffrey and Cersei were the ones responsible ultimately for Lady's death. So it's basically like, it's like the meme from Ghosts. It's like, you in danger, girl, is basically what the cards have told Sansa. So
I would agree it's probably Lady, but I don't know shit about tarot. I always thought that Lady dying was a symbol that Sansa was going to die. I always thought she was going to die. And we talked about this a little pre-record. At this point, it is very possible that George... First of all, it's still possible George could kill her. But in his original outline, he had not planned for Sansa to live. She was going to die. She was not going to survive. And I thought Lady's death was foreshadowing of that. Now, George said he submitted that outline with 13 chapters.
The first 13, yes. And this is 15.
Which I don't think includes the prologue. Yeah, I doubt it includes the prologue. So, I definitely think, like, she was possibly during this time on a different course. Or she could be still on the same course, because what happened in the show, in no way, I would say, is going to happen in the books. It can't, like, par for the course. Like, it can't. Like, a lot of things that happen in the show can't happen in the books, because Sansa's storyline was, in my opinion, messed with the most, more than anyone's in the entire story. Like, the whole Sansa gene pool merger was just, it just really had a butterfly effect on her entire story. So I do think that she could die, and I thought that Lady represented that. And furthermore, I thought it more so represented her dying for her sister, where Lady died for her sister. Like, Lady died in the place in Nymeria. I thought it meant something like that. I still think it does. But what I wanted to talk about was Cersei had a plan for these wolves before she left Winterfell. She had it in her head. She told Jaime and Tyrion at breakfast, these wolves aren't going to King's Landing.
I'm trying to remember, like, did she say King's Landing, or was she more, like, specific that it was the Red Keep?
So I feel like as soon as they left Winterfell, they were marked to die. And this just happened to be an opportunity.
Yeah, well, and even, like, when Arya's like, I want to go riding, and Sansa's like, oh, I hate riding, and Joffrey's like, let's go riding. She's like, oh, I love riding. Like, oh, yeah. Sansa.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, she's just so enraptured in Joffrey. Like,
oh yeah, she is, and he's putting on the charm. Like, he's like, they're riding, like, after they eat and stuff, and he's singing to her. Like, it's just like, his voice is so sweet and pure. And, like, I don't know, like, they're going to see where Robert beat Rhaegar. Like, they're doing all this, fun stuff, charming stuff.
Sure.
And
it's romantic.
And then it's not anymore. Because Joffrey and Sansa hear the clanging of wooden swords or wooden sticks. And Joffrey, like, pulls out his sword and is like, you're safe with me. Like, just playing the gallant prince. And it turns out that it's Arya and the butcher's boy. And I don't know, this is particularly, I hate this because it's so awful, like, the outcome of this situation, because it really cements, like, just how awful Joffrey is. Like, you saw him when he was dueling with Robb, and he was just being, like, funny, like, cracking jokes and stuff, and just being, like, an ignorant little twat. But now you see him being, like, a straight up asshole.
Well, Joffrey wouldn't properly train with Robb in the yard because he, scoffed at, like, using wooden sticks, where, truth was, like, he knew he was going to get his ass kicked by Robb.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he comes upon, this kid who obviously is not trained as a knight. They're fighting with sticks, and Joffrey can terrorize him. It's, like, the only way, like, a sadist, cruel, weak coward like Joffrey can, like, get his rocks off.
Yeah, it's, like, straight up bullying. It's like when, I'll say, like, when like, a person is mild and meek, and you just, like, straight up savagely attack them because that they can't do anything about it, or they won't do anything about it. It's like that. Like, you're taking advantage of a situation because you can, not because you're brave, not because you feel like Sansa's actually in danger. Like, you just see this boy, he has a wooden sword, he's a butcher's boy, because Sansa's already told you he's just the butcher's boy. And you take advantage of the situation just to torment him. And it just shows how awful Joffrey is. When they get into the fight, Joffrey goes up to the butcher's boy, cuts him, wants to fight him with a sword. And Arya gets involved. And Arya and Joffrey start fighting with sticks. And it says Arya swung at the prince again, but this time Joffrey caught the blow on Lion's Tooth and sent her broken stick flying from her hands. The back of his head was all bloody, and his eyes were on fire. Sansa was shrieking, No, stop it, both of you, you're spoiling it. But no one was listening. Arya scooped up a rock and hurled it at Joffrey's head. She hit his horse instead, and the blood bay reared and went galloping off after Micah. "Stop it, don't, stop it," Sansa screamed. Joffrey slashed at Arya with his sword, screaming obscenities, terrible words, filthy words. Arya darted back, frightened now, but Joffrey followed, hounding her toward the woods, backing her up against a tree. Sansa didn't know what to do. She watched helplessly, almost blind from her tears. So what I wanted to say about this is, like, this kid, Joffrey, like, Sansa, she says, like, I didn't know what to do, and stop it, stop it, stop it. You're spoiling everything. This kid just is trying to kill your sister. Like, he's slashing at her and cussing at her with this sword, with real steel. And like, if Arya had been like less of a swordsman, or like if she had less training than what she had, then she could have been killed. So I was kind of like taken back when, instead of running after your sister, you kneel down and like, my poor prince, what have they done to you? Like, how much regard do you have for your sister? He just tried to kill your sister.
Yeah, I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I also think it's like, you know, kids go wild and go crazy, and you know, when kids fight, you know, you kind of like have like your, you know, predetermined side. I don't have like a good excuse for Sansa, but I also like, it's just like, it's what happens.
I get it, but it's just like the sword, like him swinging a fucking sword. If a guy swings a sword at my sister, I could be pissed off at my sister.
Well, and I guess you like, but that's also like, you know, Sansa's dumb at this point. Like, you know, I don't know if it like registers that, you know, how dangerous the whole thing was when it happened so fast. And was that before Nymeria bit him or after?
Yeah, it's before.
Yeah. You know, and then and that's kind of like, and then Nymeria comes in, like, it's, you know, you had like two deadly weapons like kind of going at each other at some point.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do I do?
So after that, Nymeria jumps in and kind of attacks Joffrey, which, like, go Nymeria. And Arya's like, Nymeria, like, get off of him. And as soon as she tells him to stop, she gets off of him. And he just, like, Joffrey just lays in the grass crying like a little bitch. I love Arya. Arya's like, she didn't hurt you much. And throws his sword in the river. And then this is where Sansa hasn't realized yet that Joffrey is this vile human. But she goes to Joffrey and she's like, you know, I'm sorry. Are you okay? My poor prince. Look what they did to you. Look what they did. My poor prince. Don't be afraid. I'll ride to the holdfast. I'll bring help for you. And he snapped at her as he was like, then go and don't touch me. And I think part of it is that she has seen him.
Yes.
She's seen him.
Absolutely. Yes, like he, well, and also, like, you know, once he, like, started fighting with them, you know, like, the facade of Joffrey, like, came off, and, like, and he's not even a sociopath, like, Joffrey's a psychopath, and at some point, like, it's, like, you can't keep that facade up at all times, and especially, like, being injured, and he should have been more than injured, but then Arya would have also had died. If Joffrey had died, like, there would have been no question about that. She saw him, and he knows. Yeah. And, you know, just being, you know, saw him being weak and, like, crying, and I'll tell my mother, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when someone like Joffrey, when they wear this mask, and then it falls and you see them for who they really are. I feel like that's why he has so much contempt towards Tyrion.
Yes.
Is because Tyrion knows who he is. And not only does Tyrion know who he is, he tells him who he is. And now he's wanted to be this valiant prince. He's wanted to play this valiant prince. But this has happened, and now she's seen, his betrothed has seen that he's actually just a little bitch who got disarmed by a little girl.
Oh, Mark Addy saying that in the show is just like the best. Like, you let that little girl.
And in the book, well, I don't want to go too far. I was gonna say Renly laughing and leaving the hall about. But that's the next week. And that's basically Sansa 1. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think the only thing I would add is, so right before the magical day, Sansa leaves Lady behind, and I thought I had the quote, but I don't. But it basically, like, she left Lady behind and the Hound was there, and it's just like, I kind of want, like, a Duncan Egg-esque novella series about Lady and the Hound, like their afternoon together. Because
that's
the fanfic I'm gonna write, Lady and the Hound.
Yeah, Joffrey makes Sansa leave Lady, and he leaves the Hound. So yeah, that's Sansa 1, and basically Sansa, her introduction, just like to wrap this up in a nutshell for me, her introduction lets you see the song singer, poetry, story believer that Sansa is. Like, Sansa is a dreamer, and she doesn't have the best education. She's lived a sheltered life, and she's going into a really dangerous situation. Like, I find it so funny, not funny, but ironic that once they cross the neck and they're out of the north, they start to die.
That is true.
Ladies.
I also think this is, and it continues through this book. And, earlier you were talking about, like, Sansa's, redemption / growth arc. She also has a lot of, all the Stark children, like, she has, identity arc, and she wants to get out of the North. It's boring. It's, isolated. Like, the capital, King's Landing, is so much more exciting and glamorous and romantic. And, she's turning her back on that aspect of herself, like that northern girl, where we're at in the books, you see her, like, actually kind of, like, being very drawn back towards that, and she is becoming more Stark-like, and I feel like this is obviously laying the groundwork for all of that stuff.
Yeah, a thing they do on the show that I really like, the way she dresses when she gets in the South, the way she does her hair when she gets in the South.
Yes.
It's like she abandons the northern parts of her. And I think it's kind of forced on her when she loses Lady. She loses that kind of willful side of her. And it kind of switches to, like, a devotion to Joffrey. And I do feel like all of the Stark children do have these identity crises. The one, though, I feel like doesn't is Arya. I feel like Arya knows, like, exactly who she is. And her story arc to me is so funny because it's like she's trying to forget who she is. Like, all these people are trying to find themselves, and Arya's like, okay, I'm not Arya. That was Arya. That's like she's trying to become no one, but she knows who she is, and she never adapts to King's Landing. She doesn't adapt at all.
And it's kind of, and even though, like, Sansa does, but she had to eventually, like, escape because there was no way, especially, like, let's say Joffrey had lived to coming of age, and he would have shipped Cersei off, like, she was being terrorized by Joffrey, and, like, she was doomed.
Yeah.
Like, whether or not she actually would have died within King's Landing, or, might as well be dead in King's Landing. Like, that wasn't, no Stark does well in King's Landing. Like, you go in, you go out, get all Creek and Stark on it.
Yeah. In the South, period.
Yeah, but because he's like, I'm here. Nope, gotta go. Which is
Kragan Stark was the only one.
Well, but that show, and
he's the anomaly.
should not confuse the two. But Jon's gonna be the same way. Jon's gonna go there and be like, no thanks, bye-bye.
Right? Yeah, he totally isn't gonna want the throne. He was not gonna want to play the Game of Thrones or none of that shit, unless he's like completely changed when he comes back, which a lot of people think that he's gonna be.
I think he'll be changed, but I don't think he'll be that kind of change.
I think he's gonna be more wild, like Rickon.
He's definitely going to be more wolf-like, for sure.
More wildling-ish.
Yes.
Woofy wildling. Yes. Which he already is kind of like that anyway. But yes, that is Sansa 1. Thank you so much for coming on the Obsidian Nights podcast and talking about Sansa 1. I will definitely keep you in mind for a Davos chapter.
I love a good shadow baby. That's all I have to say.
All right. Well, as always, thanks for listening, and I will see you next week.